Okay, so I watched the movie again, and I didn't forget how much I loved it, but it reinforced how much I loved
Oh.
it. There's so much in here that I feel like was specifically designed for me. It wasn't, but it feels like it was. Like the nuances to Clue. That's like my favorite movie. The all the little asides, like I play Jack in Into the Woods, and there's the goodbye old pal thing near the end of the movie, and it's like there's a lot of stuff that I feel like a lot of people are going to think that uh, this movie is specifically made for them. I was a theater nerd, blah blah blah. So forgive me again if I just gush at you for
No,
a minute.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that. It holds up, honestly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess a sort of silly question to start with. If you were going to go to Rose's party, who would you dress up as?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. I mean, in the real version of Rose's Party, I was assigned
Oh,
uh, I
okay.
was assigned Phineas Fogg from Around the World in 80 Days.
Okay.
I I think I would like, you know, want to feel like I could like pull off some version of Dorian Gray, which without having
I wrote that down right there. It was like Dorian
you're
Gray.
right, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Without having any knowledge of the sort of queer context of it, of course, like
Hmm.
just being completely oblivious to the fact that I would walk into this party as some kind of a queer coded character. That would be me in 1994.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing a an entire year where I only read books about queer characters or written by queer people. And I think Dorian Gray is. I haven't read that since like college, so I wanna reread it. Um, I got a sort of a general question. I sort of cringe whenever I hear anytime there's a new like gay movie out or anytime that there's like a coming out story coming out. You always get these really annoying people online that say that they're like sick and tired of coming out stories. And I sort of resent that because it's not like every coming out story is the same. And I'm sort of wanting your take on that since your film is partially a coming out story. Like sort of what is your reaction to that if you ever hear that or see that?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a couple of things going on with that criticism.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of them is that when you're dealing with any underrepresented group or any kind of minority group, you have a limited amount of media that comes out about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think that it's just easier to see limitations in that media than it is if it's all, you know, done by a major hegemonic group. Uh, and it just highlights it quicker, in my opinion. If
Mm-hmm.
if you're like, oh, there's too many coming out movies, and it's like, well, that's because there's not a lot of queer movies, period.
Yeah.
Uh, and statistically, that's just what's happening. And I feel like the second thing is that like the coming out story is just something that is baked into the queer experience, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's a part of what it is to be queer. Like, at some point you have to disclose yourself to somebody else or to yourself or both, however that process might work. And it maybe in 100 years there will be something that will be different about that.
Yeah.
So far that has not changed, and so I think that is also just a a just a part of the culture itself.
Right.
And then specifically with my film, the reason I sort of make the choice that I made in it, in terms of, spoiler alert, the main character not coming out, is um, that was my reality in
Mm-hmm.
1994. And I feel like I wanted there to be somewhere in this array of all the different coming out films, a film where you just watch the person struggle the entire time, and it's not about that big sort of cathartic payoff moment, but it's about watching how hard making that moment happen is for someone, particularly with, like, you know, his nearest and dearest. I mean, these people are closer to him than probably his family even is, and he's still having such a hard time getting to that point. And then, you know, I specifically wanted the Oscar character in there as well, as someone who's like much earlier in that journey. that journey.
Okay, because I had the second time that I watched the movie, I had a lot of questions about Oscar. Maybe not any that I can, you know, randomly come up with when you bring that up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please. I mean, I'm more than happy to derail and talk about Oscar.
Now, there's first of all, I'm forgetting the actor's name.
Nico Greetham.
Nico, that's right. I want to say Nick. No, it's not Nick. Nico is so good. He has this really there's a genuine earnestness to the character that I think is very charismatic. But then the sort of delineation that he brings to his performance, whether he is around JD, whether he's trying to impress somebody. And then I was also I wrote down bond between a straight guy and a closeted guy. Like, there's something that, I don't know, there's something that I thought I picked up on a lot more with the bond between them, where, you know, you're friends before like the big secret comes out. And I sort of was really fascinated about that the second time that I watched it. What can you sort of talk to me about the development of that character? Because Nico is so good in this role.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm particularly excited because he never gets cast in roles like this. So it's and yet he's personally maybe closer to this role as just who he is in real life.
Okay.
He's a very just a very like sweet, earnest, you know, somewhat naive in like a nice way person.
Yeah. And sort of in that world, like, straight guys like that aren't really played like that before. They're not written that way anyway. Like, we don't get a lot of that. Sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah. But yeah, my intention, you know, in terms of, and this is like, you know, you make a movie and it's not yours anymore, right? It's right. Other people get to own it and do whatever they want with it and interpret however they want, because you are no longer the owner of that text. So I'm also sort of stating what I put into it, which right. is maybe different from what someone gleans from it, because it, you know, it's open to interpretation. All you know, everything is open to interpretation. So my feeling is that Oscar is either bi or gay, and is so far in the denial realm that he has, you know, created this scenario where he has this girlfriend, but he just can't be with her for some reason, and you know, is very sort of embedded in a lot of you know, queer leaning things without really understanding that he is, because he's just so naive and blind to himself and blind to who he really is, like blind to his own identity. And that, you know, my sort of one of the sort of future intentions there is that I feel like Oscar's going to have a really tough time at UCLA.
I kept wondering about what his time in UCLA is going to be like.
I feel like it's going to be kind of miserable because he has not figured out who he is, and it's going to be and I really liked the idea. I feel like in a lot of, you know, coming out films, you don't always get two large characters who are in that coming out process, but at completely different stages of that process. Like
Oh yeah.
Gene like
Right.
knows he's gay, and he's just like not sure when and how to tell everybody. But
Mhm.
he has accepted this, and is, is that work is done. Um, I feel like Oscar is very, very, very far from that. But you still sort of see like maybe pieces of where things might develop in the future with.
Mhm. Oh gosh. Yeah.
But there's also just like the I feel like with teenage boys, there's this energy when it comes to friendship that is always potentially homoerotic, right?
Yeah, I thought that with like the near the beginning when him and Jean are like rolling around on the floor and they're like, "Are you ticklish? Are you ticklish?" And I was like, "Okay, there's that point when you're, I assume, a young man, whether you're gay or straight, where you become sort of conscious of the how people are looking at you interacting with other people, if that makes sense. Like I imagine, if it was a guy who was more assured in his heterosexuality, he wouldn't even do that no matter how close he was to Gene. Um, yeah.
So, I mean, to your own, point, having seen the film twice,
Hmm.
like, I feel like if someone watches the film and feels like Oscar is straight, or he's, maybe kind of questioning,
Hmm.
or if it's unclear, uh, I think that's totally valid, because I also feel like, part of what you're watching with this movie is people going through change,
Hmm.
and sometimes embracing it, but mostly resisting it.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
he's one of he's one of the people in this process. And so the fact that it's not 100% clear is in some ways kind of what the movie's about for all of these characters. It's kind of messy for all of them. Like they don't really have
Yeah.
clean journeys in this film, if that makes sense.
And who you are when you're that age and what you think you're going to do in your life, there's a clear, like when I was in high school and I knew I was going into like theater school, like my experience of what I thought it was going to be and what it turned out to be are completely different. Um, okay. Um, I want to talk a little bit about, well, not, I guess not a little bit about, but a really, there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of themes about faith mixed with homosexuality and being involved in the theater. I feel like when it I know these kids so much. There are so many people that I did community theater with when I was, in my early 20s. People that are younger than me that I became very close with, who sort of, I feel like the conversations were very, very accurate that I heard. I remember I did a production of Jesus Christ Superstar, and someone told me that I shouldn't be playing a part because I was gay. And I was like, all right, well, okay, bye. Yeah, I sort of wanted to know, like, the line that really stuck out to me both times I saw it, where Gene says, God seems pretty man made to me. And I love that line. I think it's a very wise line for somebody so young. Um, and there's sort of an innocence that goes on along with that point of your life when you have faith. And they talk about faith being something that connects each other. And it reminds me of youth group, and it reminds me of all these things. It's a very sort of nostalgic feeling when that theme and is presented, especially in the dialogue. And I feel like that's really hard to do in a movie like this. Can you sort of talk to me about infusing the script with that? Because I think that's one of the most impressive things about the film.
Oh, thank you.
That was a really rambling sort of question,
No, not at
but
all. Um, yeah. So again, so much of this, the kind of core details of this, are based off of me and my friends, and um, that was our environment growing up. And I feel like when you see Christians depicted in media, a lot of the times it goes like one or two ways. Like either it's super earnest because it's like actually made for Christians by Christians in a really like black and white way, right?
Yeah.
Or you kind of get like the reverse version, which is kind of like the characters are kind of cartoony and they're kind of there to be made fun of, and you're like Saved, which is a movie I love, but
yeah,
it's very clear that like there's a difference between the cartoons and
right, exactly.
Like the non-cartoon characters are like the cool leads that you want, that we're following in the film. And I just like wanted there to be something in between those two poles, because I feel like that's more like real life, and that's more of a reflection of what I remember as well, is just a lot of complicated, contradictory things going on between like where different people were with their faith and where people were, trying to sort of create these lines in the sand, and the debates that we would have, but the fact that we were all still friends at the end of the day, and we were still working through who we felt like we were in terms of our faith, but without having to sort of shut each other down if someone was not in that position. And I felt like there was a lot of, this is such a Christian word, but there was a lot of like grace between us in terms of like giving each other enough like love and understanding to sort of believe what you wanted to believe.
Yeah.
Outside of like, the argumentative moments, right?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to capture that. And it's so funny because, in trying to get this film funded, like it was definitely the huge stumbling block. Like people were
really,
oh yeah, it was like the most toxic thing I could have put in the script. It was for on both sides, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like for very religious people, they were like, too much doubting of religion and too much homosexuality. And then for like gay production companies, they would be like too much Christianity.
It's like,
And so it was a real, like, I just knew that it was definitely going to do something a little different, and potentially, for some people, like destructive to actually include an array of different types of Christian characters and sort of watch them meld and interact.
Yeah, like the I think it's sort of interesting. These characters are at an age where, they can bring up something that is so paramount to them, like their faith. Maybe that their faith is something that they get from like their parents or their family. But it's sort of interesting how, they use that as, I don't say as weapons towards one another, but they sort of like,
they do though, yeah,
points to one another and sort of one up each other almost. Like I think Rose is such a fascinating character because we're on her turf, we're at her house. She reminds me so much of like Kate Hudson. There's something about her face, something about how she performs in this movie that reminds me so much of her. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's I enjoy that nobody who is religious, or nobody who is, or maybe I shouldn't say that, but maybe the people who, like, I'm not a person of faith myself, so I can see how, the Bible says this one thing, and there are people that say that, it's not all black and white, and you need context, and you need circumstances to sort of figure out how you feel about stuff. And I like how people are at different levels of, I don't want to say of piousness, but the level of faith as they use in their everyday lives, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, and because I feel like that is part of some people's core identity, and it's kind of like the safe
Yeah.
space that some people go to. Um, like I feel like Claire kind of bumps up against a bunch of different things throughout the
Mm-hmm.
evening and tries on a couple different identities
Yeah.
and don't all work out. And then like in her goodbye scene, she's like gone back to what is
Mm-hmm.
safe to
It's
her,
a very safe.
which is like
Yeah.
like
Mm.
this is my safe zone. Like I tried, I went outside of it. It was not pleasant. I am back to my center.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I feel like that is that again, that is just based off of my own experience and
Mm.
experiences of people that I've known over my life. So yeah.
Okay. Sort of going along with Claire, I think a scene that is really, it's hard to watch is the entire pool sequence. I wanted you to maybe tell me about the volatility of that scene. Not, I mean, there's the conversation between Rose and Allie, and then when it opens up and everyone comes outside, there's that it's painful to watch like Claire like swimming across the pool. And it's just like, oh, like when I was watching it again, I was like, go faster, go faster, go faster. I was just like, I was like, this poor girl. Um, like quite literally in the deep end, throwing herself into the deep end. Especially with characters and actors that are like of a certain age. Can you sort of talk to me about like directing that sequence? Because I feel like that's a really important sequence in the whole thing.
Sure. Uh, I think that in terms of like the sensitivity of the scene like that, I think that it's there's a balance between making sure that the actor is comfortable and that they feel supported, but at the same time I also feel like there's some value into making sure that we don't take anything too seriously on set,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense, so that the actor doesn't go into a zone that's not healthy mentally and emotionally, and that
Mm-hmm.
we just remember that this is a movie and we're just making a movie. um, and I to that end, like I think that hopefully everybody felt like there was that sense of comfort, but also that sense of lightness to that moment, so that it's really editing and editing and camera work and performance that is sort of creating that level of discomfort and that sense of awkwardness and you know um, uh, discomfort rather than actually feeling that in on the set
Yeah.
itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. I guess
Did
one.
that, did that answer what you wanted, or was it more
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the
Yeah. No, it's. I
moment?
mean,
Was it about
no,
making the moment or the moment itself?
both really. I just mean like that. I feel like that is a point of the film that is sort of. I feel like that's the characters reach a level that they probably haven't been to before, especially for Claire. I think there's like a shot of Nico's face, like when he realizes that she's going to do it, where he's like genuinely shocked, and like the silence in that scene is just like it's like the water in the pool sounds like a tidal wave. Like it's just sort of just like, oh god, and it's, I don't know. It's that scene every time that I've seen it has been so horrifying. Um, yeah, I don't. Yeah, so no, you answered the question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, that's definitely what I was hoping. I was,
Yeah,
I was
well,
hoping
it was
for.
very effective for me every time I've seen it. Um,
I should say, this is embarrassing to have to clarify.
okay.
I should say that for some reason, when I was saying, when we were talking about religion before, just to
Mhm.
make it clear, like I am no longer of a a religious person.
Okay.
For some reason, I feel like I made it sound like I was Claire.
Oh no, I didn't think that. No.
Okay, all right, good. And you know, not there's anything wrong with being a religious person. I just wanted
Yeah.
to hear that.
Okay.
It was, yeah. I'm like, I really get Claire, especially when she tells Jean that God will make him better and then leaves. I'm just kidding.
Poor Claire.
Poor Claire.
Oh. I forgot.
We'll have a rough time probably moving forward.
I had forgotten about the scene where is at the very end where she's the shot where she's on the couch and he's right below her, and she's just like, she tells him that she loves him, and I was like, oh God. And it was sort of like, I understand, like, you want to tell people your actual feelings, but it's also, Allie just had a conversation with you in the bathroom, and I was like, what are you doing? I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of cringy choices.
Yeah. They're all very effective and they all work very, very well. I guess one last question before I let you go is, I sort of wonder what you imagine Christmas break is going to be like. Because there's a moment when Rose is walking, like finally crossing the threshold to get on the plane, and she's crying. And I just thought that was really sad, because it's just like, that's probably the moment where she feels like the most alone, and she's been so sure of herself in this bubble of people, and she can be so theatrical, and she feels very safe that way. And I was very sort of worried for her when she's like stepping away from her friends and her family, and someone says, oh, we're going to see her in like 4 months. And, when you come back from college, there's that very specific feeling when you come back from college and you're there for the first time, and people are going to ask you all about what's it like at college, and, you meet back up with your friends. I just sort of wonder what you think the first reunion for these characters is going to be like, and from your personal experience.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's funny because there's, I never envisioned a sequel of
the movie. Give it to me.
It's fascinating how people are like, what happens in the sequel? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. What happens in the sequel? What do you want to happen in the sequel? I mean, I feel like, what I sort of wanted you to walk away with these three people that are like a little more on the naive side, so Claire and Oscar and Rose, is that even though they come out kind of, especially Oscar and Rose come out kind of guns a-blazing in the beginning of the film in terms of their confidence, that you understand that they're going to have a really rough time in college. Like, it's going to be a rough fall semester, and coming back in Christmas break is either going to be a saving face moment where they pretend like it wasn't rough, or it's going to be a unintended come to Jesus kind of moment maybe for them, and maybe they'll grow from that rough first semester in college. Whereas I in my imagination, I feel like Allie and Jean are going to grow more. Because in some ways they need to break up with this friend group, at least temporarily, in order to move forward, And I guess in some ways, maybe all of them really do. Like all five of them, like the sort of bittersweet reality is that in order to grow as people, they really need to break up. They need to like stop enabling each other in some ways, and
better without you. We need to grow as people before we grow as a group.
Yes, exactly. And whether or not that means that they can come back together stronger and kind of reform, or whether this is really the beginning of the end, I think that is something that I myself don't know.
Okay. All right. I imagine it's going to be a very humbling experience for probably the most for Rose and Oscar, because I feel like Oscar's gonna have a lot to unpack um, when he is on his own in a completely different city, I imagine, as you were hinting at before. Um, okay. Um, I think that might be all I have for you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so
Yeah,
much, Joey. It's a pleasure and an honor. I really appreciate it.